They blocked my driveway without warning, poured concrete like they owned the place, and then when I asked them about it, they told me to be patient. So I flooded their whole neighborhood. Not with a hose, not with vandalism, not with anything illegal, just paperwork permits and a little old-fashioned rain, the kind my dad used to track on his weather radio. I live in a quiet cul-de-sac outside Raleigh, North Carolina, the kind of place where the lawns are trimmed like military haircuts, and the mailboxes line up like soldiers at attention because the HOA says they should. I moved into my parents' house about 6 years after my dad died. He was a civil engineer, old-school slide rule type, and he used to say he trusted soil surveys more than people. I didn't really get what he meant until the day some guys in reflective vests smoothed wet concrete across the mouth of my driveway and told me it was a neighborhood beautification project. Their president was a woman named Carol Whitmore, polite, all smiles, always watching. And the vice president, Gavin Mercer, was the one who actually mattered. Former real estate developer, late 40s, expensive boat parked like a trophy, always talking about community value the way a pastor talks about salvation. Before that morning, the HOA had been an annoyance. A warning about a trash bin left out 12 hours too long, a letter about my grass being half an inch too tall while I was on a trip. Petty stuff. Manageable. I kept my head down because I wanted what most people want to live in the house my dad built and leave everyone to their business. Then I came back from a routine cardiology appointment, turned onto our street, and saw orange cones and a cement mixer and a neat ridge of gravel sealing off the entrance to my driveway. They'd set forms, poured a lip of concrete, and were smoothing it like this was a permanent improvement right over the path my father had always left clear for drainage. I walked up to one of the workers, tried to stay calm. "I need to get into my driveway." He shrugged. "We're pouring today. HOA, Project Beautification." Beautification. The word lodged in my throat like a bone. They'd taped a bright white sheet to my mailbox saying temporary access limitations, 2 to 3 weeks estimated completion. 2 to 3 weeks. I called Gavin. He answered like we'd been buddies forever. "Hey Caleb, what's up?" Used my first name in that familiar, dismissive way. I told him my driveway was blocked. "Temporary," he said, smooth as a polished penny. "You'll thank us when your home value goes up." "Sacrifices," he said. I'm still not sure how people can say sacrifice with such a clean conscience when they aren't the ones bleeding. Standing there, watching that wet concrete creep across the entrance my father had poured 20 years ago, I remembered him leaning on the hood of his truck boots on gravel, showing me how water follows the path you give it, how one bad grade upstream will test everything downstream. That night I walked the construction line and noticed the subtle thing an engineer's son notices: the new forms ran right across the outer lip of the storm drain inlet. At the low point of the street, the metal grate my dad had tapped with his boot and said that empties through a culvert under the backyard. To most people it looked fine. To me it looked like a problem. A narrowed intake, a raised edge, a change in grade that would choke the outlet on a heavy rain. I dug my dad's old survey maps out of a filing cabinet, spread them on the dining table, traced the drainage easement with my finger. 50 feet clearance required for structural modification near the main storm line. County approval mandatory. HOA sign-off only after engineering review. I checked the HOA website. No drainage study, no county permits. My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with my heart. They had built over the artery that kept our little kingdom dry. So I did something most people assume they'd never do. I called the county. There's a strange calm in speaking to a government receptionist. When you're furious, they make you slow down and say parcel numbers and cross streets, and the whole process turns your heat into focus. An inspector named Martin Reyes came out that afternoon, clipboard boots, the kind of man who had seen every flavor of neighborhood stupidity. He crouched by the storm drain, ran his hand along the fresh concrete edge, and put a bright orange stop work notice on the cone. "You can't restrict inlet capacity without a hydraulic review," he said, "and you definitely can't alter grade within the easement without county approval." The cement truck shut down. The workers packed up. Gavin arrived, still trying to smile through the shock of being stopped. Martin handed him paperwork and left. You'd think that would have been the end of it. Wrong. People like Gavin don't learn from being corrected. They regroup. That same evening, Carol called in a voice like syrup. "We understand there's a minor permitting issue. We'll expedite." They really thought it was a hiccup. They didn't see it as a structural mistake. It was paperwork, a delay, nothing more. They still didn't believe they'd done anything wrong. That night, I walked out back to the culvert mouth. My father had reinforced the wide concrete mouth set in the slope, the stone lining he added to protect the foundation, and I thought about water. Water doesn't argue. It follows the path you give it. I could have leaned back and trusted the county to straighten them out, but my dad taught me another thing. Understanding a system gives you leverage inside it. So I called Tom Granger, a licensed excavation contractor who'd known my dad, and told him I needed to adjust the intake on my side of the easement legally with county approval to protect my foundation from altered upstream grade conditions. I filed for a property improvement permit and told Martin everything. He approved it inside 48 hours. I did it all by the book. I wasn't sneaking around. I wasn't trying to be a jerk. I was protecting what my parents left me, because someone else decided beautification meant moving the water. Tom's crew poured a reinforced concrete barrier across the mouth of the culvert, not sealing it, just narrowing it, adding a raised lip and a debris screen to limit inflow to what the original engineered grade could handle. Gavin came by halfway through and lost it. "You can't do that," he shouted. "I can," I said. "County approved." He pulled out his phone, looked for someone above the permit, found there was no one. The barrier cured. Then the forecast came in 2 inches of steady Carolina rain. I slept that night better than I had in weeks. When the rain hit, it started slow and then didn't stop. By morning, our cul-de-sac looked like a reflecting pool. The narrowed upstream inlet and the unfinished sidewalk lip created a bottleneck. Street held several inches. By noon, the water was creeping into garages. Gavin's SUV sat axle deep. Neighbors in rubber boots tried to sweep water away with push brooms while Mrs. Donnelly stacked sandbags. The grate wasn't clogged, it simply couldn't get enough water fast enough anymore. I won't lie, I felt justified and I felt uneasy. There is a weird coexistence of both feelings when you watch physics teach a lesson. Gavin splashed to my porch, rain soaking through his jacket. "You need to remove that barrier," he gasped. "My driveway's flooded." "This is drainage," I said. "The system can't handle your modified grade. You caused this." He looked at me like he hadn't really seen me before, not the quiet guy who pays his dues, but someone who knows how leverage actually works. By day's end, 2 garages had water in them, Gavin's included. Insurance adjusters came through with clipboards. Neighbors who used to nod politely now wound their heads and looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and something like respect. They came to my door that evening, Gavin, Carol, and 2 board members' damp jackets' faces that had lost their smirk. "We need to talk," Carol said. She had dropped the syrup. "What will it take?" she asked. Not, "Are we wrong?" Not, "How do we fix this?" "What will it take?" So I told them, clear my driveway immediately, remove the forms and gravel, and pay restoration costs for the trouble and the stress they caused. $15,000. They called it extortion. I called it restitution. That night they left without another word. The rain finally stopped sometime after midnight, and the water drained slowly, inch by aching inch, at the emergency HOA meeting. A few days later, 30 neighbors packed in and listened as I laid out the timeline, the stop work order, the county permits, the risk I had protected against, and the fact that my action was permitted and documented. There was a ripple when I asked whether they'd thought about the drainage easement before laying forms across it. There was a moment when people for the first time asked whether maybe, just maybe, it wasn't me who'd gone too far, but the board who had crossed a line. The vote ended with emergency funds, authorized materials removed from my property line, and a check for $15,000 arriving in my mailbox the next afternoon. No apology, just a signature. Tom's crew reopened the intake, and the water that had stubbornly lingered finally cleared within hours. The street looked like it had before, neat and respectable, but something had changed. Now when it rains, I stand at the front window and watch water flow, the way my dad said it would, down the grid into the drain through the culvert, controlled and balanced. The sidewalk project was quietly redesigned months later, this time with proper engineering and county oversight. Gavin avoids my wave at the mailbox. Carol looks away. I didn't celebrate when garages took on water. I didn't twirl a villainous mustache. But I felt something close to relief when the system I grew up learning about, the paperwork, the permits, the drainage rules, did the job it was meant to do. If there's a moral here, it's not a sermon. It's a quiet, slightly bitter lesson I learned with my palms full of mud and paperwork power. Doesn't always make you right. But understanding how things actually work gives you leverage inside whatever power structure is trying to squash you. Boundaries matter, physical ones, like easements, and human ones, like the line between community improvement and I get to decide for you. When someone blocks your access to your own home and laughs about it, they might not be looking for compromise. They might be testing how much you'll tolerate. I didn't flood my neighbors out of spite. I let physics and paperwork do the talking. So, what do you think? Was I protecting my rights, or did I become the villain of the cul-de-sac? If you were in my shoes, would you have handled it differently? Or do you believe that sometimes the only language power understands is consequence? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd expect. If you've ever tangled with an HOA that forgot who actually owns the property, share this with them. Hit like, subscribe, and tell me, where does justice end and revenge begin?
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video. Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.